live because we need to give Cecil just a few seconds to trim. So we don't want to get too eager here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yes, I had to reboot my router. We had to stop a show mid-show today, guys, because my router was acting up. Cecil told me yesterday to reboot my router, and I forgot. Mondays are busy, but it's okay. I did not forget to reboot my router. Tonight, IDP show. Let's go live. What is going on with Cory Littleton? That and more this week on the IDP Roundtable. Guru, you're happy about the Raiders, but you're not happy about Cory Littleton on your IDP team. What's going on?
No, and to compound that mess, Cory Littleton's on most of my IDP teams, so I'm very unhappy about that situation. Now, this is one that there's two ways of looking at it. You can look at he's on a new team with a new scheme, playing a different position than what he's normally played. Maybe he's just not settled in yet. Maybe he's just needs a little bit of time there to kind of to come on, and he's definitely got the talent. He's definitely got the skill set to be highly productive in the situation, and he should be in a highly productive situation with the Raiders. But so far, he's not gotten it done. If you look at it on the other hand, maybe he's just a product of the environment that he came from with the Rams. If we look back a few years, we see Mark Barron had a great season or two. We saw Alec Ogletree have several really good years there. Both of those guys moved on to different teams and were absolutely horrible. They've never come anywhere close to that kind of production again. So it's kind of making me fear that Littleton might have been a product of the environment there more so than a great player. I've had a couple people ask me this week what to do with him. If you're in a dynasty league, you got to hang on to him and see if he pulls out of it. If you're not in a dynasty league, you probably used a pretty early pick on him, at least an early IDP pick. So you hate to cut ties with that. You definitely got to get him out of your lineup for a week or two. And I would give him maybe another week or two. And if he doesn't come around, you almost have to move on.
Yeah, Micah Kaiser doing really well with the Rams, and Nicholas Morrow with the green sticker and the interception on Monday night in the big win. Matt Schauf, DraftKings, Draft Sharks. It's all the DraftKings ads from we're back in what year was it? 2011, 2012. Matt. So one of the players you might have on your bench that you're looking at next to Cory Littleton and some of these other underperforming linebackers, and we talked about him last week, and today we get to say Kevin Pierre-Louis. Big jump for him in value, at least in terms of his output in week 2. What do we expect going forward from him?
Yeah, we had Thomas Davis active for the first time after he missed week 1. He did not play, so it looks like it's John Bostic and Kevin Pierre-Louis in the middle of that defense. Lots of tackles against Arizona. I mean, we expected pretty good play volume there and opportunities. I think it's a defense that's going to keep seeing opportunities. I don't think Washington's going to spend a whole lot of time on offense this season compared with others anyway. So, I mean, as long as those guys are playing, I say keep using them. We'll see if anything changes, but I don't think there's anything pushing John Bostic or Kevin Pierre-Louis. And I mean, like I said last week, before the season started, they were talking about how they liked him in coverage. So I think that increases his chances of staying on the field in sub packages and giving us tackle opportunities.
Let's stay on the subject, John, of players that it's small, the sample size, and we have to wonder whether we should believe our eyes. Feel free to weigh in on Pierre-Louis. What about the rookie safety, Antoine Winfield in Tampa? He has made a big splash. We've been looking for these rookie safeties. 2 of them got hurt in the preseason. Kyle Duggar's getting moved in slowly to the Patriots offense. Nothing slow about Antoine Winfield's start to 2020.
Let me start with Pierre-Louis, just because we've already been there.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's been in the league since 2014. He has a total of 86 career tackles, and that's counting the 10 that he had this past weekend. He's been with 5 different teams. He's been most of his time as a special teams guy. He really hasn't had a whole lot of opportunity to get on the field as on a defensive note. Is he for real? He's had one big game. He had 3 tackles and 1 assist in week 1. I think he's definitely going to have the opportunity. The volume's going to be there, so I think he's going to have some good weeks, but I still believe that the 10 tackle week is going to end up being an outlier for him. Antoine Winfield, This is a guy that I was high on back in the preseason, what preseason there was since the draft. I love the guy. I love his skill set. They used him exactly the way they said they would. They had him line up everywhere from edge rusher to linebacker to free safety, all over the field. Put him in whatever position, wherever they thought with the offensive formation that he could make the most impact, and it worked. Is he going to have a lot of weeks like the one he just had? That was a pretty big week. We can't expect anything like that on a regular basis, but I think the guy's going to consistently be productive for us. Kenny Vaccaro had a huge week. He's another guy that's kind of like Pierre-Louis. He doesn't have a whole lot of history of huge production like that. He hasn't put up more than 6 solo tackles in a game since week 2 of last year. He hasn't put up more than 7 solo tackles in a game since 2016. So a 10-tackle outing, I think, is going to be a little bit of an outlier there too. Is he a decent safety that you can put in your lineup as your second or third defensive back every week? Probably so, but let's not get carried away with what he did this past week. Tavier Thomas, the corner from Cleveland, had a huge game. If we look and see, he has one thing in common with Casey Hayward from week 1. Hayward had 12 tackles against the Bengals. Thomas had 9 tackles against the Bengals. Cincinnati offense likes to find somebody that they can pick on, and they will keep going back to that well over and over again. So I think this is more a situation where he was in the right place at the right time than it is that he's doing anything special. Not to mention that Cleveland's getting a bunch of guys back this week at the corner positions from injury, so Thomas is probably out of it. The last guy I want to touch on, LJ Fort. I actually lost a game this week because he recovered a fumble and took it back for a touchdown. The guy played 29 snaps. He had 1 tackle in the game, but he made a fumble recovery for a touchdown and scored enough points to knock me off. He's absolutely a mirage. Don't be in a hustle to go out there and pick him up and stick him in your lineup. He's not going to get it done for you every week, and sooner or later, the carriage is going to turn back into a pumpkin.
John, you just gave me an idea. We need to have a segment of the player that is a counterfeit that beat us, that made us take a bad beat. Every week we can look through our fantasy teams and pick out one player that we will single out because we have the platform to do it and say, even though he beat me, he's not any good. Matt, I know that Tracy Walker's pretty good. I don't know if Matt Patricia knows that. So what does that mean for our IDP teams?
I thought Tracy Walker was pretty good. I thought he was a lock to be a solid pick this year. And I thought he was going a little bit late, even though he's going toward the bottom of the top 10 among DBs. But it looks like Detroit does not feel the same way about him that we did or do. He played 83% of the snaps in week 1, which seemed worrisome, but I would take Tracy Walker even at that level. Week 2, he dropped to 53%. So it seems like they're phasing Tracy Walker out. Maybe it'll fluctuate up and down depending on matchups, but if 83% is the high point instead of the new floor, then that's not somebody that we can use. So I think you have to take Tracy Walker out of lineups. And Will Harris, who took some of that playing time away seemingly in week 1, also dipped a little bit in week 2, 80% to 67%. So I'm not sure exactly what the deal is there. I think with Detroit, you never really know whether they're doing the right thing or what might change. But for now, Tracy Walker's got to be out of lineups. I do, on what John said, I do think we want to play DBs against the Bengals at least. So if you don't have Tracy Walker all of a sudden, play whoever DBs are playing the Bengals that week. This week it's Philly, because it looks like they're going to be plenty of tackle opportunities there.
Well, John, let's stay with the Bengals then. On the other side of that matchup, you were very excited to take Sam Hubbard this year. He was one of those breakout forecast players. And Carlos Dunlap has always been there for us. We do have Lane Johnson back this week, although you have the Jason Peters in December of his career. Is this the week to stick with your Bengals? What's going on with these guys?
Well, I'm definitely going to stick with Sam Hubbard this week. The matchup, I think, is there. We know that they've had some injuries. They've had some struggles trying to keep the quarterback upright in Philadelphia. So I definitely like Hubbard's opportunity this week. I'm a little concerned with Dunlop due to the fact that his snap count was cut pretty significantly last week. He went from 70-some% in week 1 to just barely over 50% this past game, giving up some time to Carl Lewis, who's getting a little more action in there. So I don't know. Dunlop's getting a little old. I think he's 32 or 33 years old, so maybe they're going to start reducing his role a little bit, trying to keep him fresh. That's a little bit of a concern to me. The matchup is great this week, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye on that going forward. Hubbard will be in my lineup. Dunlop might be there, but only if I don't have a better option.
My big play IDP rosters with Carl Lawson, have been waiting for Dunlap to start to give a little bit of room there. Let's circle back to linebackers, Matt. We've already talked about Kevin Pierre-Louis, but there's a few other players getting opportunity, and like Pierre-Louis, we have to evaluate, especially for these waiver wire runs. By the time you're listening to this, they may be done, but people are choosing between Pierre-Louis, might be looking at, of course, Kazir White for the Chargers and Eric Wilson for the Vikings. Give us your thoughts on Wilson and White, and then if you could pick one out of Pierre-Louis, Wilson, and White to add to your team, who would it be?
So I think Eric Wilson is an add overall. He is going to get more playing time with Anthony Barr out. Anthony Barr tore a pectoral muscle for the Vikings last week, and Eric Wilson played 92% of the snaps in that game that Anthony Barr left early. We've seen Eric Wilson play more snaps in the past when another linebacker's been out, and he's delivered. Last season alone, he cracked 50% playing time in 3 games for the Vikings. Each of those games, he had 8+ tackles. So I expect him to be a full-time level player with Eric Kendricks the rest of the way. And Eric Wilson should be a good tackle producer. He's also given us plays as a pass rusher and in coverage. So, I think he'll be on the field. I think there'll be plenty of tackles. I'll be curious to see if that impacts Eric Kendricks' production at all. But I think that Eric Wilson is certainly somebody to focus on picking up this week. The other guys, Kazir White, I don't trust it yet. I mean, we'll see. We've seen him play starter level snaps before and then disappear. We've seen the Chargers just play like which cup is a linebacker under while we're trying to guess who to play that week. Kenneth Murray is the one guy for the Chargers that I believe is going to be on the field most of the time. He was second among Chargers linebackers in snaps this past week, but at 83%, I'm okay with continuing on with him. They picked him in the first round. Clearly, they want him to be on the field all the time. Kazir White went from barely playing in week 1 when Drew Tranquill started and Nick Vigil was playing starter level snaps to 100% of the snaps in week 2. Maybe it was because they wanted his speed on the field against the Chiefs. I could see that being the case. So we'll have to see about him in week 3. I'm not using him unless we get some indication before this weekend that he's just going to keep being a starter and he's going to be on the field. Nick Vigil, by the way, went from 85% playing time in week 1 to not a single defensive snap against the Chiefs, which is a more appropriate playing time level for Nick Vigil. So we can go ahead and forget about him if you did pick him up. And then I guess one more guy to throw in that you didn't mention him, but Juwan Bentley for the Patriots hasn't really put up big numbers yet, but he played 82% in week 1. He played 100% in week 2. And that was against Seattle, which hasn't been a great matchup for linebacker production so far because they're finally letting Russ cook and they're actually going downfield and not running into the front 7. So I think Juwan Bentley is another player to consider. Among those, my 2 favorites would be Eric Wilson and Kevin Pierre-Louis because they're going to have opportunities. I know that Pierre-Louis is not somebody who has been a starter in the past, but he's got opportunity in Washington right now. He's going to be in the starting lineup, and there are going to be tackle opportunities. I mean, John Bostic is also a guy who's bounced around to a bunch of teams, been in and out of the lineup, and has settled in Washington and put up tackles. So, not somebody to cling to if we get – and, nobody's going to be a 10-tackle every week guy among this group. But I think, give Pierre-Louis another matchup. Forget who they're playing this week. I don't have it in front of me. But
Cleveland.
There you go.
So he's going to be hanging on for dear life to Nick Chubb trying to bring him down.
There you go. So I say we give him Cleveland as a starter. If he doesn't put up numbers there, we wait and see what happens after that. But I like him as a pickup. And Eric Wilson, I think, is going to be a consistent contributor, 7-8 tackle range overall with upside beyond that. We've seen double-digit tackle games from him. And again, a little bit in the big play categories.
John, let's put a bow on this waiver wire emerging linebacker talk. Feel free to weigh in on Wilson, on White, on Bentley, and then Joe Thomas for Van Der Esch in Dallas.
It's funny that great minds think alike because exactly the things that Matt touched on with Eric Wilson is the stuff that I wrote in my column this week when it comes to him. 3 games last year, he played over 50 tackles. He had on top of 50 tackles, played over 50 snaps, had at least 7 solo tackles on all 3 of those games, and he had a couple sacks in there as well. So I definitely agree with everything you said there. I like Wilson as the top pickup this week. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to give us some consistency. We know what we're getting there. The Kazir White thing, I really have to wonder if the reason that Vigil got the call last week over White was because they were playing the Bengals, who was a former team. Sometimes coaches actually take some of that kind of stuff into consideration. Guys always love to play against their old teams. So just maybe that was some of the consideration there why they went with Vigil. White has been a starter in the past. He was supposed to be the starter a couple years ago and got hurt early in the season and never came back from that completely. So I think as long as Tranquil's out, he's probably going to be a relatively safe play. He's got the speed. He's a former safety, good coverage, and he's got the kind of things that they want at that position. He's a lot closer to bringing to the table what Tranquil did than anybody else they have on the roster. So from that perspective, I like him, but I also agree that the Chargers are a little wishy-washy with their linebackers at times, so you never really know what to expect. Joe Thomas kind of surprised me this week. He's another guy that's never done anything in the past, even though he's had some decent opportunities. And I kind of passed over him on the waiver wire this week just because his history has been so poor as far as production goes. He comes out and has 6 tackles and 6 assists in his first start, plays every down. I think that's just a golden situation there. And even if he's not anywhere near the quality of player that Van Der Esch is, just the pure opportunity, I think, is going to make him a decent pickup. And Bentley's another guy that I've had my eyes on and kind of watched. I've been a little disappointed. Actually, I've been very disappointed with what little he's done with the opportunity that he's had. But a lot of times we have no choice but to go with players that have the opportunity. I'd rather have a guy that hasn't done anything that's going to play every snap than a guy like, LJ Fort, who's got 2 games with 16 or so fantasy points, but has only played 50 snaps, less than 50 snaps in 2 games combined. Sooner or later, the bottom's going to fall out there, and sooner or later, the guy that's on the field is going to make some plays.
Yeah, that's this is the thing with IDP is sometimes we don't necessarily expect some middling talents to provide the big numbers, but the situation can help us provide that. And already here in week 2, just like on the offensive side, we're scrambling. We've got to open up some spots for some of these players, Matt. Okay, so I'm going to go over some players that we can drop. I'm going to say the name, and you tell us what's going on, and we'll go lightning round through these, all right? And also maybe who to pick up or any other notes on this if there is a corresponding move. Let's start out with Darian Thompson.
Yeah, dropped to half playing time in week 2, so it looks like we can just dump him. I thought he was going to be HaHa Clinton Dix when HaHa Clinton Dix wasn't. He's not. Daryl Worley took some snaps, not to the level where we can use him, but he's going to be somebody to watch going forward. So I don't think that there's a pickup among Dallas safeties.
Isaiah Simmons.
Played even fewer snaps in week 2. He started out in the teens. Now he's in the singles. Dump him. Apparently it's Devondre Campbell, and it's annoying.
Different coaching staff, Hassan Reddick all over again. I don't know. Another rookie, Logan Wilson.
Yeah, meanwhile, Hassan Reddick's playing, by the way.
Right.
Logan Wilson, I thought for sure, but his playing time also actually dipped in week 2 from week 1. Akeem Davis-Gaither played more snaps than Logan Wilson in week 2. You can't use either of them right now. They're only keeper league material, and even Jermaine Pratt and Josh Bynes are playing 80% or less. It's Bynes, it's Jermaine Pratt if you have to have a Bengals linebacker. If you don't, it's a nice situation to avoid.
We thought maybe Jordan Fuller, the rookie, was getting playing time over Taylor Rapp because Rapp wasn't 100%, but 2 weeks in, what do we think now?
Sean McVay said after week 1 that Jordan Fuller earned the job. It looks like he's going to be in the starting lineup. Taylor Rapp's playing time did not pick up in week 2, so I'm dropping Taylor Rapp right now. If something changes, if somebody else gets lucky, then they can have him, but I don't see a role for Taylor Rapp to get full playing time right now.
What about Sione Takitaki in Cleveland?
Playing time cut in half in week 2. Now Mac Wilson is practicing again. I think B.J. Goodson would probably stay in the lineup ahead of Takitaki, so dump him.
And the last one, Danny Trevathan?
Yeah, this one came kind of out of nowhere. I thought that maybe he got hurt and I didn't see it, but it didn't. His playing time was cut. They said it was a package kind of thing. Deion Bush got some extra playing time. There were a couple other guys getting some snaps mixed in. Maybe they're getting some more time for the pass rushing guys now that they got Robert Quinn healthy after he missed week 1. So we'll see how this develops. if it's a deep league, I wouldn't drop Danny Trevathan just yet, but you definitely can't start him in week 3 because he was down around 50% playing time in week 2.
All right, we've opened up some spots, John. Maybe we don't need those spots for linebackers. Maybe we need it for defensive line. We've got some new faces in San Francisco to talk about. We've got a new face in Dallas who was overshadowed by another new face, at least in week 1. And then an emerging edge rusher in New Orleans who is the help on the way at defensive line positions.
Yeah, I love the way you cover stuff, Matt, because we think alike on pretty much every one of those guys. So it's nice to have somebody else that you can agree with there. Defensive linemen, some guys you want to look at picking up with the injuries in San Francisco. They're a little depleted. They did have some pretty decent depth. That's going to be stretched a little bit because they lost so many guys. Kerry Hyder has stepped up. He's a guy that can play defensive end on early down, slide inside in passing situations, much like what Solomon Thomas has done in the past. I think he's definitely someone that you can look at. He's had a sack in week 1, had 6 combined tackles in week 2, so he was already getting a little bit of playing time, and he has been productive in the past. They also went out and signed Ziggy Ansah. Ziggy Ansah is still a premier talent at the NFL level. Unfortunately, he has a chronically bad shoulder. So the over and under on him lasting, how long he lasts before the shoulder flares up and he starts missing time, for me, is about 4 games before we start seeing that happen. What they'll probably do with him is, like I said, they'll have Hyder play on early downs and then slide inside and bring Ansah in passing situations to provide the pass rush and to keep his snap count down. How much playing time he gets or how effective he is after some time off remains to be seen, but he is somebody that we may potentially target, especially if you're in more of a big play-based scoring system. Everson Griffin showed up pretty good this week. He had, I believe, 70-some% of the tackle or of the playing time of the snaps, ahead of DeMarcus Lawrence, who is gimpy with a sore knee now. We're still watching to see how bad that is. But it looks like Lawrence could at least be limited by it this week, if not out for week 3. Griffin looked pretty good, pretty fresh, got in for a sack, had a couple of tackles on top of it. I think he's somebody that we might be able to squeeze into our lineup. And Trey Hendrickson had 9 tackles and 2 sacks over the first 2 games. I really don't know what it is that keeps this guy out of the lineup. I know they spent a high draft choice on Davenport. He's been down early in the season, so Hendrickson is getting an opportunity to play. He came out last year and had 3 sacks in the first 2 games, and then as soon as Davenport was able to go, they kind of reduced Hendrickson's playing time. Davenport's still not able to practice. Doesn't look like he's going to be back this week. It may be a while before he gets in there. And I think the more Hendrickson gets a chance to play, the more he produces, the better chance he has of solidifying playing time and possibly even a starting position going forward. If he gets a sack on against the Packers this week, I will be very impressed because Aaron Rodgers is very tough to get to.
And Packers' offensive line is really firmed up nicely. Also, Matt, Falcons fans, it was like a nightmare, a waking nightmare, what they had to live. But that might not even be the worst news coming out of week 2. The Falcons, they get to face Mitchell Trubisky, but how many players on their first team defense will be able to play? What's the IDP fallout here, the MASH unit for the Falcons?
Yeah, I actually have to hop a plane right after this because I'm trying out for an edge spot for the Falcons this week. So
Jets are asking me to play wide receiver too, so I think I can make the Jets wide receiver group.
So on the injury front, DeMonte Kazee and Ricardo Allen both missed practice Wednesday. Takk McKinley missed practice with a groin injury. No practice for Foye Oluokun at linebacker because of a hamstring. He's coming off a nice game. Actually, Foye Oluokun played 18 snaps against the Cowboys. He had 6 tackles, 5 solos, 3 forced fumbles in 18 snaps in that game. Then went down with the hamstring injury. Dan Quinn called it the best 17 plays of a linebacker he can remember. So I guess that other play where he got hurt, he's throwing that one out. But that's going to be something to watch when Oluokun does come back. Because if he's doing that and he's impressing the coach that much, we should expect at least near full playing time in the spot that helped Devondre Campbell get a whole bunch of money from the Cardinals in the offseason. So keep him in mind when his hamstring's healthy, but he didn't practice. The safety landscape is changing. Damontae Kazee, before this injury, was the only full-timer at safety for the Falcons through 2 games. Played 94% in week 2, 100% in week 1. Keanu Neal's been down around 80% both weeks. I think if Damontae Kazee is out, that probably helps Keanu Neal play more, and especially if Ricardo Allen's also out. So we'll watch them and see if Keanu Neal can give us a little bit more. But that whole safety group is going to be something to watch going forward, especially when they're all healthy.
Maybe not everyone's healthy for your IDP team, and you're having trouble setting your lineup. We've got some disparate data points between week 1 and 2. But the Guru's here to help, to wind us up every week. The much-awaited matchup segments. We're staying positive. Some starts this week. No sits yet. We don't have enough data for that. But we can tell you some players to get in your lineup, John.
Yeah, we've got a few guys here, and there's not a whole lot of data to work with, but there's a few guys that are starting to emerge and a few teams that are starting to show their colors a little bit, so I'll take a shot at it. Already talked about Everson Griffin. I think we definitely want to get him in our lineup this week against Seattle. Seahawks have allowed 5 sacks so far. As long as DeMarcus Lawrence's knee is still an issue, Griffin should get to start the majority of the playing time there. Like Danico Autry and Justin Houston against the Jets. The Jets should be behind early in this. They haven't given up a gross amount of sacks so far, only 4 so far on the season, but it definitely looks like the game script would be put them behind early, which means a lot of pass rush opportunity for the Houston or the Indianapolis defensive ends. Melvin Ingram has been pretty quiet so far. Gets Carolina this week. Carolina has allowed 6 sacks. He's beyond overdue to start making some things happen. I like his opportunity to break out this week. Sam Hubbard and Dunlop versus Philadelphia, we've already talked about a little bit. Eagles have allowed 7 sacks, and they have some issues up front. Kerry Hyder, we've talked about. I also like Eric Armstead against the Giants. As beat up as they are up front for San Francisco, the Giants are still struggling offensively. They've allowed tied for the most sacks in the league so far with 7. I like Armstead's opportunity to get in there this week as well. And we've all kind of watched what the Bengals offensive line has done so far. They have struggled greatly. The Eagles did get back all of their pass rushers this past week. We have Graham, Barnett, and Sweat all in there. They were in a virtually equal rotation. I think any or all of 3 of those guys are viable defensive linemen too this week, second starters against that offensive line. Linebackers, Anthony Hitchens stepped up a little bit, played a lot more in week 2, had a pretty good outing statistically, gets the Baltimore running game this week. I think that's a good matchup. We've talked about Eric Wilson. Not only does he have a lot of things going for him from the past perspective, but he has a great matchup this week with Tennessee. I like Patrick Queen as a matchup with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's one of the few linebackers in the league that has the speed to chase him down, and I think he's going to be doing a lot of that this week. Some defensive backs to get in your lineup: Rasul Douglas, Dante Jackson against the rookie in Los Angeles, Justin Herbert. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. Antoine Winfield Jr., everybody's going to have him in their lineup after what he did last week, but I think he's going to have another great game this week. Likely we'll see a lot of Noah Fant, who could be the leading receiver for Denver. Anthony Harris versus Tennessee, another Derrick Henry matchup. He will be backing up Eric Wilson on a lot of those tackles. Von Bell really hasn't produced as we thought he would since coming to Cincinnati, even with Sean Williams out. I like him to draw a lot of coverage on Zach Ertz this week, which likely means a lot of opportunity as well. C.J. Henderson against Miami. Henderson has been solid in both of his first 2 starts, and you never know when Fitzgerald is going to have one of those games where he throws 4 or 5 interceptions. I think Henderson, at the very least, is going to have decent tackle numbers, and he's got some big play opportunity there as well. I like Carlton Davis against Denver and their backup quarterback and young receivers. I think he has an opportunity to make some big plays happen, as well as a few tackles along the way. Jalen Johnson, rookie in Chicago. Take your pick, young man. Do you want to cover Julio Jones or Calvin Ridley? Either way, you're going to get thrown out a lot, and they're going to complete a lot of passes against you, so there's going to be a lot of tackles. And the last one I'll throw out there is Emmanuel Mosley. Got the Giants matchup this week. The Giants couldn't run before Saquon Barkley went down. They're going to have to throw even more now. And Mosley is a guy that most offenses pick to target.
Yeah, especially now the number one corner that Richard Sherman is out. So should be interesting to watch. Always a moving target, but that's why we have the best in the business here. Matt Schauf, SCHAUFDS, for Draft Sharks. Also does a lot of excellent podcasts of his own over there that you need to check out. You know, the Guru, John Norton, you get Eyes of the Guru as part of your Football Guys subscription from the great IDP team. I'm lucky to get to learn, absorb like a sponge once a week as we get together for the IDP Roundtable. We appreciate you for playing the only real fantasy football, IDP fantasy football, and always staying classy.